Hello and welcome to the Nexus Podcast. Our topic for today is making a career out of writing, and our guest is an accomplished writer. His name is Lennox Yieke, and he is the Corporate Affairs Manager for East Africa at Mars Wrigley. Strong writing skills are essential in his line of work, which deals mainly with corporate communications, advocacy, and public affairs. Previously, he worked as a writer in different consulting and full-time roles in financial journalism, public relations, and investor relations for private, public, and non-profit organizations and other clients in the US, the UK, Nigeria, and Kenya. He's always loved writing, and today he takes us back in time, exploring how his love for writing started, the lessons he picked up, and what he thinks young people in Kenya and beyond interested in writing can do to unlock their potential. So Lennox, welcome to the Nexus, and maybe you could start us off by telling us about your journey to becoming a professional writer.
Thank you for having me, Jotham. It's a pleasure to be back here, and I'm glad I could join you. So to go straight into what you asked, I think my journey to becoming a writer began long before I actually put pen to paper. Or in my case, I actually typed on my laptop my first article, which I can still remember, though I won't disclose what it was about for now. Yeah, but it began long before, because I grew up questioning a lot of things, and I realized the more you question things, the more you had to familiarize yourself with the art of conversation, because the only way you could find answers is by having conversations with people. Mm-hmm. So early on, I realized being angry about change won't help you. You'd rather ask people, why has this changed, and find out, rather than being angry at the problem. You'd better look for a solution. So that's how I got into writing, because writing is very much like the art of conversation. So you listen to society or to your audience, you understand their issues. People always talk about their issues if you're keen enough to listen. Wherever you go, if you go in the financial world, which is where I started, you'll always hear people asking, is this stock overvalued? Is the next crash coming? Is the next bubble here? If you look at the newspapers from 1950 to 2002, look at Wall Street Journal, or 2020 rather, not two. Wall Street Journal, look at Financial Times, look at whatever it is you're going to look at. All these things are always covered every day of the year. It means these are the fears that people have. So I realized that people have fears. Before you start saying, I'm going to write about this, I'm going to write about that, people's fears and hopes lead them to read what they read. So if you're currently reading a particular book, it says that at that particular time, you're going through the fears and hopes in that book. And it's okay, because we all have cycles. So let me summarize this point. So when did I first write? So I had questions about life, and I wrote about a particular thing I was facing based on the problems I had. And that's how I started writing.
Well, it's amazing what you say about fears and hopes, because right now, I don't know, and maybe this is a question you can answer for us. Are Kenyans readers? Because if you're writing about these issues, it's also because maybe you've read about those issues, expressing your hopes and dreams or fears, as you say. But the impression that I get is sometimes Kenyans read very superficially. And so does that mean that their hopes and their fears are not deep enough, or they don't really want to go as deep as you went by questioning things?
I think I partly agree with you, but I also partly disagree. I think Kenyans read a lot. I think the question is, what do they read? Because if you look at usage statistics for all the major social media sites, Twitter, Facebook, name it, more Kenyans are joining those sites, and it's all content. And of course, there are videos and pictures, but there's a lot of written content. Look at some of the tabloids we have and all that. They also sell. So Kenyans read. I think it's a question of, what do you read? I think all of us have had that experience. I mean, for me, it was when, at some point, and it still happens, when you read the Bible or you read a book that questions your decisions, and you get a certain fear in your heart, or a certain concern, or a certain alarm is raised in your head. or a certain light bulb comes. The light bulb is usually a moment of hope, and the alarm is usually a moment of fear. But whichever the case, you read something that makes you question something in your life, very fundamentally. And I think for me, that's the experience most Kenyans lack.
Yeah.
The reason I can't really judge because I don't know. If I did, I'd really want to change it, because I think books do change the world. And if you read through history, it is actually books that have changed the world.
Yes.
The pen has changed the world more fundamentally than wars have. Yeah.
Yes.
And imagine the technology of war today, and still wars won't change the world, but writings will. So, so I think if Kenyans need to probably start reading, widening their range of reading.
Yeah. So you've talked about books, and I'm wondering whether you've written any books. What I can imagine is you've written more of articles. So if Kenyans are meant to read more, what would you recommend? Is it more books and more of articles? And maybe you can give us a bit of an experience of how your writing and reading journey began.
Okay, so first, let me answer the simpler question.
Yes.
So is it more of books or more of articles? I think it's more of what challenges you to question yourself in fundamental ways.
Yeah.
And like me, this is what worked for me, and that's what led me to become very curious about knowledge, is the things that make you realize that you're actually happier because you found out you didn't know, rather than you are right. So to put it in another way, when the joy of being right is surpassed by the joy of finding out what is true. Because everybody doesn't like reading because they have what you call like assumptions or prejudices or stereotypes about things. And these assumptions are like your own little corner of security and safety in life.
Yes.
That keep your world together and help you make sense of the world around you. So when you read something that shakes that, most of us get uncomfortable. And I think it's okay to read things that shake you, because if what you hold on to is really firm, then your strength is affirmed. But if what you're holding on is phantoms and shadows, I mean, it's good to read things that challenge you. So that's what I'd say. So I wouldn't say articles or books. I'd say read things that challenge you.
Okay.
Now,
for the second, the second one,
So for the second one is if I write articles. So I just write. Let me say most of my writing takes the form of articles because of the nature of my work.
Yes.
But nowadays I don't write as much as I used to. Of course, the job I have has a lot of communication, and that involves a lot of writing. But when I wrote about articles, and even today when I write at work to my colleagues and to our partners and etc., I think what writing means to me has never changed. Because for me, writing is the art of conversation before anything else. First, you have to listen. Yeah, it's the art of conversation, because never assume that what you believe and what you stand for are the same things that someone else stands for. Yet, despite all our differences, there are things that bring us together. And the only way you can identify those things that bring people together is by nurturing the art of conversation and being able to sit down and respectfully listen and understand and find perspective and find middle ground, etc. So it's about the art of conversation. And before you have a conversation, you have to acknowledge the existence of others. You have to acknowledge the existence of an audience of diversity, of different voices, of people who will disagree with you very strongly. So for me, that's the first rule of communication, and it will come out well orally if you believe it. It will come out well in written format if you believe it. So you have to believe that genuinely. The only way you can communicate well is if you first listen, which is, of course, conversation, because conversation is about listening first. Then you understand. And understanding for me means you take in all the data that's being given to you and you sit down and you say, is this really right? You question it against, a set of values that you grew up with, a set of values that your corporation or your employer or your organization holds on to. You will compare it to all the other sources of value that you know. And if you don't understand still, you question your audience internally, of course. You don't accuse them, but you assume the best in people. So you say, maybe they got it wrong because of... So you make excuses for them in your head, and
Yeah.
That way, at least you're able to listen more calmly.
Yeah.
By the time you understand, and you can ask questions. Don't always feel that you can't ask a question to your audience and tell them what do you want to hear, because you're trying to know them, and they'll acknowledge that you respect that. And I think once you get a clear understanding of what your audience wants, then you can respond to them in writing or orally in a very clear, confident, and respectful manner. And that's what conversation is all about. It's about being clear, it's about being confident and respecting the views of the other, acknowledging them, recognizing and responding. So I think for me, that's what I love doing.
Yes.
And wherever I can do it, I do it. But I've always realized that if you can write, you'll do it better.
That's a good take.
Yeah.
That's a good take. And could you tell us how this journey began?
Okay, sure. So I already told you that the first article I wrote that I can remember, of course, we all wrote compositions in high school and all that. But the first article I wrote that I can remember was at a time in my life when I had seen certain things and gone through certain things. I was probably 20. It was probably in the year, I won't disclose my age. It was probably in the year 2012.
Okay.
No, 2010. Actually, 2010.
2010, yes.
Yeah, 2010, 2011. Yeah, and I wrote that article, and I never thought much of it, but there was a brother of mine, or cousin of mine, who also used to write at the time, and he was a very prolific writer, and he was a very gifted young man I admire today.
Yes.
And I told him, hey, Frank, take a look at this article and tell me what you think. And Frank really loved it, and he added his... Frank is like a Shakespearean guy. He knows English. He added some fancy things, and I really loved the article flowed.
Yeah.
But more than anything, at the moment, of course, I couldn't realize, but many, many years later, when I look back, I say, what I picked from that situation was that article was good because it had a clear argument.
Yeah.
You could see the problem, you could see the frustrations, the options, you could see the solution. So it had it communicated. There was a conversation. That's why I thought the article was good, because it really related. And that's what they say, that your writing is relatable. Because sometimes you can write things that are just so up in the sky that only you can read.
Yeah.
But there are things you can write that anybody can pick and say, I can see what this guy is saying.
Yeah. The clear arguments.
Yeah.
That you're talking about.
See what this lady is saying. And I agree or I disagree, because not everybody has to agree with your writing. And in fact, the mark of a good writer is always the number of people who disagree with what they write about, but still read it.
Yes, but still read it.
Yeah.
So how did you move on to now your second and third and etc. article?
So I'd say the first time I did that, it was more of my character than my talent or lack of it. I wouldn't say that it was really, really talent per se, but it was more of my character at the time.
Yeah.
Because I've always been a very outgoing person. Yeah, in the sense of, though I'm introverted, I'm outgoing in the sense of I like chasing after new things and ideas and getting absorbed with what I'm doing. I'm a man who believes that if you do something, you need to love it. And if you don't get what you love, then dump what you love and love what you have now. You get it? Yeah, because you can't hang on to things that you want and they're clearly not coming. You can dump those dreams and imagine better dreams, or make better dreams of what you have. And that was precisely what happened to me at the time.
Yes.
I was studying my first degree in computer science at Egerton University, and I was at a crossroad. Growing up, I've always been very good with computers, still am.
Oh, okay.
Especially with software. So I really, really wanted to play with computers all through my life. So by the time I finished high school, I said I'm gonna do computer science. But by then when I went there, the sheer amount of mathematics, and don't get me wrong, I loved maths, I still do. I scored A's in maths all through.
Yeah.
But I always differed, and still do, with how maths was taught. Because for us, maths was taught like, these are numbers you just have to cram, and if you don't cram them, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Whereas I felt maths was and is about problem solving. And the reward that you have from solving a problem from point A to point B is so huge. You want to solve a bigger problem and a bigger problem. Now, so that's when I went and did computer science. But the time I got to second year, I was clear this thing is wasting my time. Although I was having such a good time in campus. And I didn't have a laptop for my my first year. But in the long holidays, my mom bought me one and I was very, very happy. My mother and my father were very supportive of me all through. So they got me the laptop, of course, with a lot of sacrifices. And the time the laptops were very expensive and they used to get lost at the universities because people break into your dormitories. And that's the laptop actually that I used to write that article about the lady. So it was already, so it was about a lady. So now
you've disclosed something.
Yeah. But it's okay, it can go on the record. I'm now happily married. Yeah, so
that's good to hear.
So I had that article. So I got curious about the article because I like solving problems. Because I wrote the article and I didn't feel satisfied. It didn't change what happened. So I Googled, now where can I put this article now? So I Googled the article writing, and then it hit me that there are people actually making money on the internet writing. I'd always heard about e-working and all these online things, but I hadn't tried. And I moved on. But after like a month, I was walking in town and I saw an advert that writers are needed. So I decided to go there and show my article.
Yes.
And the guy saw the article and said, sit there and start writing.
Wow.
And and he don't think it was such a big job. It was the funnest job for me at the time because it was a cyber cafe. So I didn't go to a blue chip multinational or something like that. It was a cyber cafe, and the guy was called Spike. Very entrepreneurial guy.
Yes.
I still have tremendous respect for him to this day. And Spike used to do a very interesting business. Basically, he had 4 computers. One computer used to download songs for people on flash drives and memory cards and stuff like that. Another one, he used to get people applications for green cards.
Yes.
And stuff like that, and all that government thing. Then one was for browsing, and then the other one was now for me. So you're given articles to write, and you're told, write with keywords. And then Spike would sit on his computer all day and go home. And then one day, like after a month of working, that was during my long holiday for first year. And my earnings had started growing, and I was happy because we used to be paid per article, and I won't disclose how much it was. Yeah.
But it was good money for a university student, I guess.
There is no such thing as good money for anyone. But and I believe, and I stand by that, there is what would say, there is commensurate reward for the effort offered.
Yes.
So if that's good, that it was good. It was commensurate. Let me say.
Yes. That. Yeah.
Yeah. Not good. The good is relative in my commensurate.
Yeah.
So it was commensurate pay. But the point is, so I went downstairs. It was at a place in Nakuru. So I went downstairs. I went outside to have a break, and then all of a sudden I saw my friend from uni. He used to do engineering. He's called Garari.
Yeah.
I asked Garari, what are you doing here? And he told me, my computer is spoiled. I need money. And you, what are you doing? I told him, I'm actually at a new job here. It's cool. I've made this much. The first thing you do always when you're young, when you want to tell guys how things are going great.
Yeah.
So and Gary was like, hey, I don't have anything to do by the way. I was like, can you write? Yeah, I can write. So there's this guy up here called Spike, and I'll talk to him. So I spoke to Spike, and I was like, actually, I need more manpower. So he decommissioned one of the computers that was doing those things, and he brought the guy. So he was called Edu. So Edu and I would always compete on who's writing more, and we were very good friends. So by the end of the month, when we were taking our pay, we decided what to do with it. I don't know what he did with this, but we had a lot of fun and all that. It was my first salary, and I also had a lot of fun. I went to Nairobi. Those days going to Nairobi was a big deal. Yeah, because I was from Nakuru.
Yes.
I went to Nairobi. I with my best friend Moshai. We went to all the clubs you could think of, all the young things that people do when they're young,
Yeah.
But when I went back home, there's something else that remained, and it's that part of me that questions constantly. The part that remained was, so this is what making money is all about. So because for me, I asked myself even the next question, which was the next logical question: what if you don't go back to make it? What if the opportunity you thought that you have is gone? What if someone who's more disciplined than you comes along? What if? So those what ifs made me realize that work is still good. Work isn't bad, but work requires balance. It requires goals.
Yeah.
It requires you to be focused on what you want. Yeah. So by the time I went back to uni, at the time I was doing computer science, I started questioning a lot of things. That why am I doing this thing? And I know that I've already gotten what I want from computers, because I remember I told my mom when I was a kid that one day this computer is gonna make a lot of money for people, including me. I used to tell her that all the time, because by then computers were just new in Kenya, and I'd already seen that the reason I was fascinated by computers wasn't so much because I really wanted to understand how they work, though it's good knowledge and it's really mathematics, but it's because I wanted to understand how you can use them to do things easier, right? So the moment I used a computer to make money, my interest in understanding all those math lectures, especially the way they were taught to add salt to injury, for me that it evaporated. So I no longer had interest in computer science, but I had a lot of interest in now this computer can make money. So I started researching on the internet other ways to make money using the internet, and I realized everything you click on the internet is money for somebody.
Yeah.
And I think that was the light bulb. I was like, then what am I doing? I need to find out how to make money. And Ngarari and I were both in the same university. He's the guy who we worked with, Edwin. Used to be the guy we worked with at Spikes. Yes. So we were like, we need to find a way to keep this pipeline of work that we had. Did you get some tips? Did you steal some insights here and there? And he was like, no. I never observed anything. And like, but to be sure, I think there are these online websites. Let's check. And when we checked, we remembered, there was a website called Elance that we used to get the works from.
Yes.
And then we went on Elance, we got websites, we got accounts. The accounts were free. It's just an online working site where people put everything they want done, small tasks. And then we started doing the work 50-50. It was really straightforward.
What were you writing about? I mean, what were the typical articles and things you were churning out each day? What are the typical topics?
We couldn't even remember because we were just churning them out by the volumes, not by the quality, because it was something called search engine optimization, which basically, if you understand how search engines work, if you search Jotham, Bagavi, Jotham, Strathmore, the next thing it will associate is with teacher, school, etc. Study. So the reason it does that is that there are certain keywords that people use when they input on search engines.
Yes.
And then search engines kind of comb through the whole World Wide Web, picking up those keywords and then using certain metrics of like who clicked on what more, what was shared more, what created engagement more, and then gives you like page 1.
Yes.
So everybody wants to be on page 1 and page 2. So at the time they used to create websites where they put a lot of keywords that link back, and we were part of that industry. So that industry died and all that work died. But at the time we'd made some considerable amounts of money, Edwin and I, considerable for campus, because those were the salaries that a lot of people were starting out with. So it was quite a game changer for us financially. But at the same time, it was also a game changer mentally, because by this time although I used to like having fun, I had some discipline. I used to save. I used to think about ideas. We used to brainstorm. Then one day we got an interesting client. A client I'll always remember. He's from the UK. He's called David Wingfield. And one day, if he gets to listen to this, I always thank him a lot. So David Wingfield gave us articles on stocks and told us you need to write about stocks. And we thought, this is what we've always done. So let's use the keywords: buy, hold. And we wrote something and it was like, this is incoherent. It's not. This is. But you can do it. You know what he said? But you can do it.
But you can.
He saw the energy and the drive. Yeah, but you can do it. But you can do it. And he said, actually, this is how it's supposed to be done. But then we realized these things we're writing about are actually companies that affect you and I, that sell the products we use. And these are companies that we're fascinated about and we've heard about them. And the more we just learned about them, the more we understood how the businesses worked. By the time I was getting to second year, that was in 2012, I realized I actually love business. I love how business operates. I love the issues that affect business. I love everything to do with business. And that's what I want to study. So I took perhaps the hardest decision at the time, but also the most consequential decision in my life to date, which was to change my course and start afresh. From computer science, I went to study commerce. And by that time, I was so sure and so focused. I went to do the trimester program, the crash program, to ensure that I graduate at the same time. And I did that. And I went on even to become the class rep for the marketing class. So got straight A's in all marketing courses. I was so thrilled by marketing. And at the time, I had in my financial writing, we had even grown Ngarari and I until we'd gone our separate ways, but we're still friends. But we'd gone our separate ways in that we all got something that was big enough for each one of us. And we, I told him, you do your thing, I do my thing. And it was really nice. But at the time, I had really gotten far in the financial journalism. I'd done a lot of training on valuation and all the other very critical skills that you need in that space. And my reporting was really top rated. So by the time I was finishing, I had gotten a contract with them as a contributor. For the Motley Fool. So they had a program. The Motley Fool is one of the leading investment websites in the US. So they had a program for contributors, and I had been consistent. So I was part of that program, and I used to cover energy, utilities, stocks, material stocks. So these are basically mining companies in the sector. These are electricity companies, oil companies. And it was really the best moment of my life at that moment, because school was going okay. I was really learning about things that I could have never imagined, and the money was also fairly good for me at the time. And
it was commensurate.
But then I realized there was that. It was commensurate, as I'd put it, but I realized still that all these things I was reading I couldn't do when I'm staying at my parents' house, because I was still staying at home. I was a student, right? All these things I was doing out of my bedroom. And I was like, I need to take my own decision. So I brought up the conversation of moving out, and my mom, knowing how who I am, flatly refused. And I listened. But they supported me so much, and my mom would never ask me, where are you getting all this money from and all that? But my mom actually did something very useful. She encouraged me to invest, and I did that. Even when I was a student, in real estate, etc. So it was that moment of where you start growing and you start seeing, I was a fool before, so I must be a bigger fool now, because I still have much more to learn. So I was in a good place, because the bad place is where you see, nimetoka mbali, I've come from far, and then you start resting. Because even if you've come from far, you still have so much to learn.
So much to learn. There's this fellow on the internet called Jim Quick, talks a lot about reading, and he says leaders are readers. And going back to a question I asked earlier, I guess writers are also readers. So if you were to recommend a book or books, are there any sort of general readings that you could recommend?
Okay, I think I'm going to end by being very frankly honest with you. It will be a very good conclusion, because I know it's ironical. So to be honest, I haven't read that many books. And also, to be honest, no one book really comes to mind as that one book that opened my eye. I'd say I read more of articles, and the articles is the sources. So probably I can say the quality sources of information for me. I love Bloomberg. I love MarketWatch. I love The Economist. I love Financial Times. I love Business Daily here in Kenya. I love African Business Magazine, published in Africa Business. I love the Washington Post. I love I love the East African in Kenya. I love the Standard newspaper from time to time when I do read newspapers. Though, of course, nowadays we get all our newspaper news on Twitter.
Yes.
So I love news. So I love news.
Yeah.
But then after I read news, I question a lot of it, and then I get perspective.
Yes.
And then I discuss with people. So that's how my reading patterns are. But now to answer your question, of course I've read books, but of the books I've read, I don't know the name of the author, but it's called The Richest Man in Babylon. That book is so true, because if you read it, it's a book that I assume when I read it, because I read it a long time ago, but I can still remember the details of the book. The book assumes that it takes you back to Babylon, this ancient city where they have the, 7 wonders of the world, the hanging walls. It was like this very rich empire flourishing. And, Babylon is an interesting country, because in Babylon, you can't farm. There are no natural resources. There's nothing.
Yeah.
But there's creativity, and there's ingenuity, and there is progress. There's determination. And then there is, and very importantly, there is learning.
Yes.
And concern for the poor, not just all these things. And there is, if you read the book according to the book, and there are also times when there is no concern for the poor, and I know there are other sources of history that show that. But in that book, it shows that basically capital is not bad, because you see the story of the man who's rich is because he has built a system of saving and reinvesting and getting compound interest, and that involves a lot of humility, because you have to fail a lot. This guy went through many failures. At one point he went and bought gold on the advice of, I don't know, a block maker or something, somebody who doesn't deal in gold. Because there you hear rumors like, hey, I hear this stock is selling, or I hear people can do quail farming. So he went on the trend, and he went and bought all this gold, and he was conned by I think it was the Phoenicians or those ancient people. So it's a very interesting story, because you see yourself with those characters, and you see that it's so true that sometimes you work so hard, you save all this money, but you hadn't thought of this. And then I love the book. I still I look for it, I think, on the internet. I read it once again.
Okay.
It's one of those books I read, and I just clicked. It just clicked. You read it to the end, and you say, I have nothing to add.
Yeah.
Like
wow.
it is just an interesting book for me.
So to wind up, do you have any parting shots that you would like young men who want to get into writing as a career? Do you have any parting shot for them?
Well, I'll just say, if you don't start now, you'll never find out if it's for you. That's what I'll say. I don't know, because I don't know who's listening. All I'll say, if you don't start now, the only way to find out is to start now. You'll find out if you fail, you accept the failure and learn. If you succeed, accept the lessons and move on, because success is usually many failures coming together into one big learning. So, and that's what I'd say, but don't take any pressure. It's not as hard as it looks.
Wow, that's a really good takeaway. Just start.
Thank you, and I hope I kept you engaged, and
thoroughly.
I look forward to doing this again in future if time allows, and always a pleasure to speak to you guys. You're doing an amazing job in terms of education, and also in terms of mentoring young people to try new things, to be creative, and to grow. So good job, and keep it up.
If you'd like to find out more about the Nexus and listen or subscribe to more podcasts, visit our website. That's www.mbakathistudycenter.org/Nexus. There you'll find our contacts and other interesting material like articles, book reviews, and projects to which you can contribute. Thanks for listening.